All right, let's go ahead and solve our type annotations challenge. I've gone ahead and created a project in Playground called Type Annotations Challenge Solution. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete this first line of code here so I have a bit of space to work. So let's go ahead and create our first type annotation. I'm going to say let my gender, and we're going to specify that this is going to be a string. And then we can say my gender equals male. So we also wanted you to practice, if you were up for it, doing things in a single line. So we could say var number of friends, and we'll specify this is an integer. And we can set this equal to 5. And then we can do comma, number of acquaintances. Oh, misspelled that, acquaintances. And we'll set this equal to 20. And we'll see that this is completely valid. Not only that, but we can update our number of friends. So let's say number of friends is going to be equal to 10. Maybe I made some new friends. And as a result, I'm going to reduce my number of acquaintances. So we'll say my number of acquaintances will be equal to. And we see that this is completely valid because we made these both variables. So this is great. We can do type annotation on one line. Here we see that we did :int, and that was fine. And here we didn't need to do it because the computer program automatically figured out that this was an integer. However, we can add the int here, and that will be fine as well. So I'm just trying to show you a few different things, even though hopefully the solution was pretty straightforward for you. It's always cool to definitely mess around and make sure that we're able to understand where we can add type annotations and where they are not valid. Okay, it's time to start playing around with variables. So let's go ahead and open up Xcode. We need the beta version here. And we're going to go ahead and get started with a brand new playground here. I'm going to go ahead and call this variables. And I'm going to make sure the platform is iOS here. You can go ahead and select next and select create. I'll just add this right on my desktop here. So the first thing we're going to do here is remove our line of code here. Notice that they've already gone ahead and created a variable here. You know that now because of the var keyword. Its name is str, and it has a value of hello playground. So we can go ahead and delete that. And we can jump right into it and create our first variable. So we'll use that var keyword we talked about that was required so that we know the apples that will fall on my head will be a variable, which means we'll be able to update the value of apples that will fall on my head. So right now we'll start it off at 0. Let's also go ahead and practice creating another variable. We'll give this one a different name. So we'll say my name, and we'll just say for now that my name is Archimedes. Notice that this time we're using a string. Remember we said a string was quotes that have a bunch of characters in the middle. And for our first one, we use the number, or we can say int, which is the whole number here. We'll talk about ints in depth in the future, but for now, we're just going to set it equal to a whole number. So what do we mean when we say we can update the value of a variable? Well, let's change the value of this variable. So we're going to say apples that will fall on my head, and we'll update its value equal to 1. And then we'll say my name, and let's change this to Isaac Newton, guy famous for, among other things, an apple falling on his head, discovering gravity. Pretty cool. But in terms of learning comp sci here, let's go ahead and just figure out how does this relate to making variables in Swift and changing their values. Well, we started off, and initially, right here, if we were to take a look at apples that will fall on my head, it has a value of 0. And if we were doing any coding with that variable here, the value would be 0. But right here, we set its value equal to 1. And for here on, if we're going to do additional things to apples that will fall on my head, its value would be equal to 1. So that's how that's working. We're also updating my name to be Isaac Newton. And the same principle applies here. Now, notice that we're not reusing the var keyword. We just give it a different value here. So we've already said that apples that will fall on my head is a variable. So we don't need to tell it that it's a variable again. So we don't have to do that once. And let's just practice going ahead and setting these variables to be a different value. We see that we can do this more than once if we want. So we can say apples that will fall on my head, and we notice that we're also seeing some autocomplete here because we already said var apples that will fall on my head. So we get some autocomplete here. We can just use return. And we're going to go ahead and set this equal to 200 now. And then we can say my name will be equal to William Tell. So we see that we're able to update the value of our variables more than once, and that's completely fine. We were not able to do that with a constant. So let's go ahead and show you that we can't recreate a value once we create it. So what does that mean? Well, let's just create a variable named x and we'll set its value equal to 100. Now, you might say, okay, I want to do another variable x and we'll set its value equal to 10. This is not allowed. I have two choices here. I can either remove the var and just say x equals 10, or I can change this name to be something else like y. Now, right now, my computer program isn't throwing an error here. It should be. So what can I do? Well, I can select execute playground, and this is not going to fix it. So what I'll do here is I'll close this out, and I'll reopen this, and now we'll see that error here, right? Invalid redeclaration of x. So this is just a bug in the playground. Hopefully, Apple fixes this by the time the live version comes out. But this is an illegal line of code here. So I can either write x equals 10, or I can write var y equals 10. All right, so just keep that in mind that you can't reuse the same variable name or constant name again when you're going ahead and typing them out. Okay, so let's just practice this one final time. Let's say var waves that crash on the beach, and we'll set it equal to 40. Let's go ahead and update that value. Maybe something happened. Maybe the moon shifted. More waves came in. So we can say waves that crash on the beach. And we'll set its value equal to 200. So that'll do it for variables. Hopefully you've been able to see that we've been able to update the value of a variable and that we can't redeclare a variable once we've already declared one with a specific name. All right, it's time to talk about variables. So what is a variable? Well, according to Apple, we associate a variable with a name, such as welcome message, and it has a value of a particular type, such as 10, and that would be an integer or a number, or a string, which we said was a series of characters, something like hello. A variable can be set to a different value in the future, and this is important because this is the big contrast between a variable and a constant. So we see here that the structure for creating a variable, we have a var keyword instead of let, and we see that they're both in pink, right? So this means that it's a keyword here. And we see a name here, something like current login attempt, and we see that it has a value. And we see in this case, the bottom right-hand corner of our screen here, we see the value can be changed. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example out loud here. We have a variable named apples that will grow on that tree, and we'll assign an initial value of 15. You can see that at the bottom there. So why would this be a variable? Why wouldn't we make this a constant? Well, just thinking out loud, imagine if there was a massive storm that came through and destroyed our hypothetical tree. In that case, we would want to set the apples that will grow on that tree down to 0. So making this a variable gives us some flexibility for the future to update the future value of how many apples will grow on that tree. Whereas if we made it a constant, we'd be locked into 15, and if our tree got destroyed, that wouldn't make any sense anymore because obviously we're not going to get 15 apples from that tree. All right, let's go ahead and create 3 constant challenges. I've gone ahead and created a brand new playground here, and it's called Constant Challenge Solution. And if you had trouble, you can follow along, and then I definitely recommend you go out and you try to create your own constants. This is pretty important. So let's go ahead and say let my string, notice that we're using this let keyword. This means it's a constant. And then we have a name here. We're going to say equals my name is Dorian Gray. And if you were to try to change this name to prove that this is a constant, we could try saying something like my string is equal to, no, actually, my name is Elliot. And we see here that we get an error. And the error here is it's going to once again tell us that we cannot assign to a constant here. We would need to make this a variable. We're not going to do that. But we proved that we aren't able to change the name here for my string. Let's try another example. This time we want to use a number. So we're going to say let my age equal 30. And once again, let's try to change this value. So we'll say my age equals 27. And we're going to see here that this also throws an error. We can't change my age because it's a constant. And let's try one last one. We're going to say let I am pretty forever equal true. I suppose I should have wrote in handsome there, but that's fine. And we see that that's fine. We can't change the value of this to be false. We can't set this to be equal to false, once again, because this is a constant. And once again, the compiler isn't catching up with me yet. It should be throwing an error. And there we go. We see that the error is now appearing. If you have some issues, you can always close the playground down and reopen it. Sometimes there's some issues where the compiler doesn't work. You can also go to editor, execute playground, but often just restarting playground is the easiest thing to do, especially since this is in beta right now, and sometimes there are issues with beta, and we can often fix that by just closing and reopening our project, at least when it comes to playground. So the point here is I'm not able to change the constant named I am pretty forever to false. It's not possible because I've made this a constant. So I guess this must be true. I'll be pretty forever. Let's solve our variables challenge together, and I've gone ahead and just created a brand new playground here called variables challenge solution, and I removed that first line of code there because I don't need that. That's the automatically generated code by Apple. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create 3 variables. I'm going to go ahead and create my first variable, and I'll say my age is equal to 30, so that'll satisfy creating a variable that has a numeric value. Let's go ahead and create a second one, and we'll say my favorite color, and we'll set this equal to red. And this will be a string. Remember, a string is just quotes with a series of characters in the middle. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll create a Boolean, and I'll just say I am bald, and that's false. Now, one cool thing to note here is the naming convention I'm using here, right? Notice I'm using camel case, and we'll have a whole series on naming conventions, but notice I'm joining these together. Also, I am bald sounds like that's true or false, right? It's almost like I'm asking a question, am I bald, or I am bald, that is false. So just kind of like your naming conventions here can help. We'll also get heavily into that as well. So let's go ahead and prove that we can update these values. Let's say my age is going to be equal to 31. I got older, so my age must have changed. Let's go ahead and update my favorite color here. We're going to say my favorite color, and we'll set this to be orange. Sometimes I can be a little fickle. I like to keep people on their toes, so I'm just going to change up my favorite color. And I'm going to go ahead and say I am bald. Yep, that's going to be true now. I lost my hair. A little bit of stress creating this course and, just getting older. Sometimes your hair falls out. So that's how we can create 3 variables and update the value of those variables. This is a very important concept to understand, even though it seems very simple. Understanding that you can update the value of a variable, but you can't do that with a constant is super important to writing things in Swift. All right, so it's now time to talk about constants. And in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and open up Xcode. And I'm going to open up my beta here. And we're going to select Get Started with a playground. And I'm going to go ahead and call this constants. The platform will be iOS. And we go ahead and select Next. And we'll just create this right on our desktop. So we can actually delete this first bit of code here. We don't need that variable string. This is actually creating a variable, and we want to create a constant. Now, let me ask you a quick question before we delete this. Can you think of a good way that we can convert this line of code into a constant? Well, if you answered let in your mind, or you said it out loud, or whatever you did, you would be correct. That would now be a constant. So we see here that Apple actually provides us with a little bit of a warning here. And we see that it goes away here when we click away from it. So just be a little careful. There's still some bugs in beta. But now str is a constant with the value hello playground. But let's delete that. That was just a little bit of an example here. Let's create some constants together. And we'll do this a few times just so you can kind of see that we're going to be able to change the name of the constant. We're going to be able to give it a value. But you're going to see consistently that we use let. We have an equal sign, which assigns a value, and that we always put the let on the left. So we're going to say let pi equal 3.1415. And what this is doing is it's setting the constant named pi equal to the value 3.1415. And when I say it's setting the value, that's coming from this equal sign here. We say that this is an assignment operator. It's assigning the value 3.1415 to pi. And we see that it's now a constant because of this let keyword. Let's try creating a few more. Let's say let string constant equal Swift is awesome. And we now have a constant named string constant, and it has a value of Swift is awesome. Now, unlike our previous example where we just used a number and we said that pi is equal to this number, our string here is just a set of characters. So we could even put numbers in here, that would be completely valid. But if we tried to do math on these numbers, it wouldn't work. It's a string here, and string just basically allows us to group text together. We can put symbols in here, we can put numbers, that's fine, and it just saves it. And actually we see here on the right side here, this is just showing what this value equals for string constant. And we see that it's adding the quotes here to show that it's a string. Well, we can actually do a few more examples here, just so you can see us assigning a few more constants. And we're going to say let time until asteroid hits equals 106.7560. And the number is completely arbitrary here. And once again, what we're doing here is we're creating a constant named time until asteroid hits, and we're giving it a value of 106.7560. And this is assigning a number. So we can say let games in baseball season equal 162. Once again, we're going to assign a number here. And we can say let death and taxes equal true. Okay, this is a different type here. True is a Boolean type, and we could also assign false here. It's fine. A Boolean type can be true or false, and we'll have a whole little series on Booleans, so we'll have a chance to talk about them. But all we're seeing here is that our constant does not specify the type here. We can assign different types. We can assign numbers, strings, Booleans, which we just said were true and false. It accepts a multitude of different types, things we haven't even seen yet, and we'll get into different types in the future. But the important thing to take away here is that we always have this let keyword on the left, some sort of name, which is the way we can refer to this in the future, and we have an equal sign, and then we assign it a value. So let's prove that these constants cannot be changed. Imagine we wanted to change string constant into a different string, let's just say a new string. If this was a variable, which was the first thing we saw when this thing loaded up, and we'll talk about variables in just a few lectures, but if it was a variable, we'd be able to change it. But because it's a constant, we can't. So if we try to type in string constant equals new string, we're going to see that this actually throws us an error here. And we're going to click here, and it says cannot assign to let value string constant. And all this is saying is it can't assign a new value of new string to the constant string constant, this name here. And it even says change let to var to make it mutable. Mutable just means changeable. So it sees here that it's trying to change this to var, And if we change this to var, this is now a valid line of code. But if we leave this as let, it's not going to go ahead and allow us to do this. So constants can't be changed, and that's definitely what you want to take away from this lecture.